Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365. Tony Shields in for Johnny Mac with me, Jody Mac. Joining us now from inside the Birds podcast.com, our buddy Geoff Mosher. I screw this up all the time. I did it the last time with Mosher. I did it again. He's, don't give me suits. Say inside the Birds. If there are suits to be had, I will defend them. Moshe, how you been? Been a couple of minutes since we had you on the show. How's your Thanksgiving?
It was great. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving too.
We did, and it was okay for the Eagles on Thanksgiving week. They played 11-1 football. Trying to not hurt myself while patting myself on the back. I picked the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl before the year started. 11-1, no shot, no chance. I had to go 11-1. Nobody did. Maybe Jalen Hurts' mom, but that's about it. Had them at 11-1 in this point. What has been the key element? A lot of things have gone right. A lot of players are playing better than thought. What to you is the key element as to why the Eagles, 12 games into the season, are the only 11-1 team in the NFL?
Wow, that's a tough one. The one key element, because I had felt for about probably the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season that beyond the obvious play of Jalen Hurts and the offensive line and the defense, the coaching, things like that, that the number one reason that they had started off undefeated and even were 11-1 is that they were leading the turnover ratio department by far. They were, I think, at one point they were plus 15. I think the Ravens were then plus 6 or plus 9, something like that. So they were, that to me, because most games are one possession games in the NFL. Mm-hmm. So when you're stealing 1 to 2 possessions per game, as they were doing by having about 15 takeaways in 8-9 games, then you're putting yourself in such a great position. You're resting your defense. You're giving your offense short field. So it allows all the other things you're doing well to really manifest. But if you look over the last 4 weeks, Jody, I don't think to my knowledge, I don't think they had a takeaway against the Titans. I'd have to go back and look, and they still won that game 35-10. So maybe that theory is going downhill. I mean, when you have the overriding thing, and is that when you're built strong in the trenches, you're going to compete. You're going to be competitive in every football game. That's why the Eagles last year, despite some real talent issues at spots, were still 9-8 because they have one of the best offensive and defensive lines in the league. When you have that, and then you can surround that with the other good things, improve quarterback play, good play calling, good coaching, a secondary that finally, for the first time in a long time, complements what the front end of the pass rush does. Well, that's what takes you from being a competitive team that can be in every game to a team that can win nearly every game. And that's why the Eagles are the way they are.
Yeah, Geoff, you brought up a lot of good points. First and foremost, pleasure to make your acquaintance. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Like Jody said, they're 11-1. No one saw this coming. And they clearly show no signs of slowing down, as we can see. And you've checked so many boxes. This team has checked so many boxes as far as how they've been able to get it done. They're considered to be one of the more versatile teams in the NFL because of the versatility of their style of winning. Right. Speak on how difficult it is to prepare for a team like this, a team that's able to kill you in the air, a team that's able to kill you in the pass, a team that's able to force so many turnovers and sustain drives and dominate time of possession. Speak on how difficult it is to defend a team, to plan against a team like this.
Tone, it's a great question because we've been talking about that a lot lately on Inside the Birds and our pregame show. Most really good NFL teams, Super Bowl caliber teams, most of them have an identifiable trait that makes them Super Bowl championship caliber. And when those teams don't win it all, if they lose in the playoffs, you start to see how they are built to be a certain way, but the other team figured out a way to take that out. I think maybe if you look back at the AFC championships, the last, 2 years? Patrick Mahomes 2 years ago. Now, granted, they had all those offensive line issues when they played the AFC championship game and lost. But you started to see what happened when Mahomes tried to do it all and run around crazy and be a hero. They lost the game. And then last year, the Bengals figured out what to do defensively in the second half of that game to totally shut down the Chiefs' passing game. Now the Chiefs are back. They're always good. But the Chiefs, perhaps the Bills, any team you want to go through in NFL history, many of them are have an identity that if the other team can figure out how to just disrupt that identity a little bit, it gives himself a good chance to at least hold them down or win. The Eagles, I feel, have dual identities. They can run the ball as well as anybody. They can pass the ball as well as anybody. So if you're going to face a team that's really known for stopping the run, like the Titans, but you couldn't hold up on the back end like the Titans, well, they're going to come out passing, which is exactly what the Eagles did. Face a team like the Packers that have actually their pass defense all right, but there have been some teams like Houston, right, where you knew that they had a bad defense overall, bad secondary especially, and they came out throwing on it. And not too many teams are willing to sort of have that amorphous identity. Not too many teams are built to have that kind of an identity. And I think the Eagles are one of those few teams that can do that, where you say, I will take out X or Y, but they can hit you with Z.
All right, the last couple of weeks, Moshe, the Eagles have done a really nice job with next man up stuff. Avonte Maddox goes down. Josiah Scott comes in, takes care of business. I didn't wow anybody, but didn't get burnt, didn't make big bad plays that hurt the team, held his own.
He got burned a little bit, but that's all right. Go ahead. I get your point.
Didn't cost him a game, did he? No, he didn't. And the last 2 weeks, I thought Reed Blankenship has stepped in and played very well for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson when he's been out of the lineup. How are the Eagles going to be able to hold down the fort without Robert Quinn? Major loss to the Eagles on the defensive. How many snaps is he playing? Like 10 snaps? But it's 10 snaps. Somebody's got to fill in and take those snaps. Milton Williams outside, increase the numbers of snaps of BG. Now, Brandon Graham's been great in limited snaps. Do you want to go back to playing him more? How do you think with Quinn out of the lineup, the Eagles will continue to formulate their defensive end rotation?
Yeah, I mean, you're being facetious, but true. I think he was averaging 10 snaps. I know the most he had played was 22, but he had some 6s and 7s in there as well. So we're talking about 10 to 12 snaps, which is theoretically 4 apiece more for Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, and Hassan Reddick. And you know what? They actually, every once in a while, I forget to mention this, but I think this is part of it. They throw Patrick Johnson on the field every once in a while for a snap or two as an edge rusher. So they've already compensated. Robert Quinn wasn't doing anything. He was clearly inhibited. You know, I had some personnel sources I spoke to who were watching the Eagles tape even after his first game, tell me that the Washington game, really, maybe that was the second one, but that he was rushing too upright. He didn't show the bend that he normally had. He just did not have the explosion for whatever reason. And they were a little surprised by it and speculated to me that maybe something was bothering him physically. So turns out that after the Washington game, he first popped up on the injury report on Thursday with a back, then it became a knee.
Jody, you briefly brought up Reed Blankenship, and I want to ask Geoff about this. You know, when CJ Gardner-Johnson went down, we all started to sound an alarm. We all became worried that a huge hole blew up in this Eagles defense. But Reed Blankenship, an undrafted guy, a guy from, I believe, Middle Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken, a school that's not really known, but you know, they have churned out a couple nice safeties. The star safety for the Tennessee Titans, I forget his name. Byard, yes, exactly. You know, he's a multi-time All-Pro. But you know, Reed Blankenship, you know, in his brief time getting snaps, he's shown an ability to just read and react. He plays instinctive. He plays fast. He plays physical. You can make an argument that he's a better tackler. He's more physical than CJ Gardner-Johnson. And, you know, I guess my question for you is, what have you seen from Reed Blankenship, you know, to show that he can sustain this level of play? You know, I know we saw a lot from him in the preseason and he made flashes in training camp, but this guy has just, you know, he got his first game starting. He picks off Aaron Rodgers. No one saw that coming. And it wasn't a fluky pick. It wasn't a tip. It wasn't tip drill. He read that play and he snatched the ball away from the defender. So can you just expand and speak on Reed Blankenship's impact and, you know, just his ability to sustain his level of success while CJ Gardner-Johnson is out dealing with that lacerated kidney?
Yeah, I think you hit on a big point there when you go back to OTAs and training camp. First of all, when he was signed as an undrafted free agent, there was not like the buzz around him like there were past undrafted free agents that they've signed. He faced a very uphill battle. And if you can go back to camp, there was a lot of excitement buzzing about the idea of Jaquiski Tartt getting into the starting lineup and kicking Anthony Harris out of a job. Well, it sort of became half true. Anthony Harris got kicked out of a job, but was not by Jaquiski Tartt, who was kicking himself out of a job. So think about right then and there just how far Reed Blankenship had to come to make the 53. You had Epps, you had Harris, you had Jaquiski Tartt, you had Kavon Wallace, and I think I'm even forgetting. Oh, they were moving Josiah Scott at the time.
Sasha Ray.
Cross-training him. Yeah, and Andre Chachre, right. So that's 6 guys right there. But we noticed pretty early on in camp that he was getting some third-team reps with Jaquiski Tartt, and then pretty early second-team reps. And then there was a time in camp where Tartt left for personal reasons. And you started to get that sense in talking to people that there was something not right with Tartt and trying to learn the defense or acclimating to Philadelphia. It just wasn't going right. And then obviously toward the end of camp, Blankenship still started to see second-team reps. So we could see right then and there, and the coaches would be asked about it, that they felt that he was smart, he was instinctive, he knew the position well. So that's really where his sort of rise began. And to your point, because we said the same thing, while he's not nearly the playmaker that CJ Gardner-Johnson is and has been for the Eagles, the fact that he is a natural safety who is used to coming up into a gap and taking on a tackler, and you saw that in the Green Bay game, you saw it in the Tennessee game, he takes the angles and the pursuits that someone like CJ doesn't have as much experience with. CJ really struggles in run defense, more so when that ball carrier gets through into the second level and takes like an angle at him. That's not where he wants to get his work done. So, but for Reed, he has a little bit more experience there. So yeah, I think in a very small way, he helps the defense out from a run defense standpoint. And that's been great for him. And we'll see what happens with his future. Obviously, you cannot duplicate, replicate, nor do you not want to not have CJ Gardner back at that spot with all the playmaking that he's given the Eagles this year.
Most, I love to ask hypothetical questions.
I'm ready for
can't
it.
Stand it, but I love it. That's what
I would love to see you interview Chip Kelly, by the way, who is the godfather of hating on every hypothetical question there is. That would be fantastic.
Never had the pleasure. Not gonna lose any sleep over the fact that I never got to run it by Chip the way I'm gonna get to run it by you. Okay. First hour, I did bring up the fact that Jalen Hurts is going so well that it might be too good for the Eagles. Good that the contract negotiation could become tricky because he can legitimately say, "Make me the highest paid quarterback in the National Football League." It could come to that depending on how high is high. If he continues in this vein, wins an MVP, the Eagles win a Super Bowl, numero uno. But we'll put that one aside for now. Here's the hypothetical I have for you, a little bit easier to swallow. Nick Sirianni is 28-1 as head coach of the Eagles, the one being the JV game against the Cowboys last year. I don't count that as a loss. That's a separate category for me, 28-1. That's damn good. The Eagles are 11-1. Let's say they keep rolling and go to a Super Bowl, maybe win a Super Bowl. Nick Sirianni does so as a CEO head coach, one of Johnny Mac's favorite phrases, which he prefers. He says that's the best scenario you can have for head coach. Get someone you can trust to call the plays. Get someone you can trust to run your defense, and you sit back and oversee it all. If Sirianni wins a Super Bowl in his second year, big season, finishes it off, parade here in Philadelphia, the copycat league that is the NFL, will we see more CEO coaches in the NFL in 2023?
That's a really good question. By the way, you scared me with the math there for a second. I thought you kept saying 28-1, and then I realized you said 28 and then and 1.
And 1.
I was like, am I missing something? But I think it kind of comes down to who you are. You bring up a really good point. And these things are hard to predict. Brian Daboll is doing a really good job coaching the Giants this year. And you felt like he got the job, right? Because of his ability to take Josh Allen and that offense and really turn it into something special, especially after the way Josh Allen's first year went. And it wasn't just that it was a good offense. It was well-designed. It was disciplined. It was diverse with its route concepts. But I was fascinated when he hired Mike Kafka, who was kind of considered a future head coach and an expert play caller himself. And then I was even more fascinated when Daboll said he was going to be the CEO head coach, because sometimes without being in the meetings, Jody, you wonder, do the owners hire guys because they think that they are CEO head coaches or because they're great play callers? Did Mark Davis hire Josh McDaniels because he thought he could connect with the last guy on the roster? Or did he hire him because he thought he was going to take Derek Carr and Devonta Adams and out-scheme everybody to death, which hasn't really happened the way So it's a great question. It is a copycat league. For a while, it seemed like all the coaches who were hired for play calling and did that. Doug Peterson being a good example, Sean McVay being a good example. But like Pete Carroll has always been a CEO style head coach. Belichick's been a CEO style head coach. Andy Reid, more than people realize, has been a CEO. He has given up his play calling going back to his days with the Eagles many, many times. And he claims to not call all the plays now.
He doesn't give it away forever, but here, take it for a bit, and then I'll take it back at a later date.
He's a micromanaging CEO.
Exactly.
But I think it's just about who you are. Obviously, Jeffrey Lurie did not hire Nick Sirianni to be a play caller because Nick Sirianni wasn't even the play caller in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. So it was natural for him to come here and be a CEO head coach. And Jeffrey Lurie doesn't look for that. He looks for vision. He looks for connectivity. He looks for the emotional intelligence. He looks for the guy who's going to treat the 53rd guy on the roster the same way he treats number 1 and number 2 guy. And not everybody functions that way. And that's why, sometimes you miss out on guys. He had interviewed Arthur Smith and some other guys who took jobs before he settled on before he decided on Nick Sirianni. So, but again, it's all about what the owners are looking for and what reaches them the most, I think. My point real quick is if you're an expert play caller, I don't think you're going to sit down with an owner, right? And if you're known for that and say, oh, I just want to be a CEO, you could, maybe that's what Brian Daboll said. And maybe that Giants ownership appealed to them. But I don't know enough because I'm not in those meetings to really know.
Yeah. Along with trying to find a coach with a vision, you want to find a coach that can bring the best out of your quarterback. And Brian Daboll has shown that he can bring the best out of Daniel Jones, so, a level of confidence that we didn't think was there, right? Yeah. And it makes me think about Jalen Hurts and what Nick Sirianni was able to pull out of him, Shane Steichen, Brian Johnson as the quarterback coach, even Tom House in the offseason, and then Jalen Hurts' own willingness to focus on his flaws. I say all that to say no one saw Jalen Hurts coming in this way. Everyone knew he would improve. I think we all can agree that Jalen Hurts was going to improve from last year, but the jump that he took, the level he's playing at, the fact that he's an MVP candidate, I don't think anyone had their money placed on that bet. So I have to ask you, Geoff, based on everything you've seen, everything you've evaluated, as long as you've talked about this game, covered the Philadelphia Eagles, what's this man's ceiling? Is there even a ceiling in sight right now?
That's a great question. I mean, there sort of has to be, because I don't know how many more things he can do that much better. I mean, every quarterback can improve in certain things, and I can sit here and get nitpicky and talk about certain route concepts or more stepping up into the pocket than into the side. But that's just picking apart little bits. I would say he's already proven he can be a very good quarterback in this league. Maybe another year like this or two, and you start to consider him the best, top 2, top 3, whatever. I mean, that list changes every year anyway. And like people say Josh Allen's the best quarterback in the league right now, and I think he's great. And I say, what did Patrick Mahomes do to lose that title? Just by not winning to the Super Bowl or losing the AFC Championship game where Josh Allen has yet to be. So it's strange to me. But I mean, you could put Jalen Hurts anywhere among the top 5 to 10. And if he continues to do what he's doing like this, then he can certainly wins the Super Bowl or more. He'll have the right to say that as well. I think that the next level thing is just seeing, can you sustain this for year after year? And just like a Mahomes or just like an Aaron Rodgers or anybody else, when you lose, the Eagles are not going to be able to put together a 53-man roster this excellent every year. Sometimes they get a little bit lucky. We can go through all the moves that they've made that were plan B, including Jalen Hurts, by the way, that turned out to be plan A, that just worked out in their favor. And it led to this 53-man roster. So when like Brady has done, like Rodgers, like all the great ones, Mahomes without Tyreek Hill, when he eventually loses players, when that offensive line isn't the most elite in the league all the time, will he then be advanced enough to still keep the team competitive and Super Bowl worthy? That'll be a question for, I guess 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road.
All right. Knowing that you get
really quickly, Julie,
like
I'm sorry. Like a quick follow-up. My apologies. He's an MVP candidate, like I said, right? What are your qualifications for the award? How do you define or identify your MVP? And is Jalen Hurts your MVP right now?
I don't have a vote, and I really haven't tried to sit down and think about it. I mean, to me, it would be between. Remember, 5 games is still a significant number of games to play, but I mean, I would put it between him and Mahomes right now without real. I mean, let's say Miami wins out. I'm that guy who's not afraid to like not make a quarterback an MVP. I think Tyreek Hill has had just an unbelievable year. What's he got, like almost 2,000 yards already? I mean, he's unbelievable. So if Miami wins out, which they're probably not going to do, and gets a top 2 seed, you'd put his name in there. But to me, it's a Mahomes, Jalen Hurts race, and maybe Allen can get himself back in if they win out.
All right, Moshe, if the Eagles were to lose this week, which I don't think is happening, we're going to get an official prediction from you in a second. A bad bounce. They make a uncharacteristic mistake. However, they come about losing right down to the end. Something happens. They end up on the short end of the stick. They've only had 1 loss this year. Bounced back quite nicely after that Washington game, taking care of business and getting right back on the right track. Mm-hmm. The timing of this loss, Chicago next week, Dallas the week after. If they lose, is this something that they can just get right back on the horse and go, all right, yeah, we stubbed our toe. Big deal. Now we're going to win out and finish with the #1 record. Or could this be the kind of loss that could lend itself to issues going forward? I know, another hypothetical, that's what I always ask. But if they were to lose, is something that's easily put in the rearview mirror or something that could be problems?
That's a gret question, Jody. I mean, they've shown the ability to bounce back, as you mentioned. They lost to Washington, and I kind of thought Indianapolis was a bad, with them coming home for Saturday's first game there and them being able to run the ball and the Eagles doing awful. I really thought that might be the first crack that you might see. And then they go and, they win that game and then come out guns a-blazing the last 2 games. I think they can survive a loss to the Giants. I do. There's still a lot of pressure on Dallas. Think about this, because Dallas has what? 3 losses or 2? 3, and one of them is to the Eagles. So you're almost a half game back. In addition, they would have to. I don't think that I would think they're going to go out to Chicago and lose that game if they lost to the Giants. I think they would probably bounce back pretty well. All the pressure's on the Cowboys, because the difference between finishing first and second is potentially getting the #1 seed and having home field to the Super Bowl, or the 5th seed is the highest you can get if you're second, and you got to win a bunch of road games unless there's some upsets. So I just feel like the Eagles know this, and they're confident in their abilities, and when all the pressure is on the Cowboys in December, history tends to repeat itself. In the last 20 years, that's not been a good thing for the Dallas Cowboys. So,
Jeff, I was thinking about this Philadelphia Eagles run defense, but then I took it a step further and thought about their special teams. The special teams has been abysmal for the better part of the season. They've been the story, as far as nitpicking, right? I don't know how you can nitpick something so obvious. And, I have to ask you this, because the special teams has had its best game against the Tennessee Titans by far. Brent Covey had over 100 yards in punt return. Those guys were flying around and kick return coverage and punt return coverage, limiting the Tennessee Titans to a long field. And they also elevated a guy like Christian Ellis, who made a really big impact in special teams. He was playing fast and he provided a spark. By your estimation, what triggered or clicked for this group? Did they have a come to Jesus conversation or what? And also, can they sustain it?
Yeah, I think you put it out, because Jason Avant, who does him and Quentin Michael do a show on our platform called Q&A, and they were talking about it, and Jason said, I don't care what anybody says, somebody got cussed out this week. Everybody got cussed out in the meeting room this week, and I tend to believe it, because yes, Christian Ellis got elevated and made a big hit, and he's absolvable because he wasn't part of the first 11 or 10 weeks. But everybody else was. And you saw, I mean, Jack Stoll made a nice hit. There was better blocking. See, Covey's returns have not been great because at the end of every return, it looks like he's getting pile drived into the turf. But he's not muffing too much. He had a few early on, but he's been all right. The blocking for him has not been good either. That looked like it was all on the uptick. So, guys got cursed out. There's no doubt about it. They got told what time it was in the meeting rooms, and they came out fired. But to your point, Tone, sometimes that has an immediate impact, but not a endurable one, meaning you fired up, you play a little bit above, and then you kind of regress back to the means. The fact that Andre Chachre, who is one of their better special teams players, was waived, and he was brought back to the practice squad, but he's out of elevations till the postseason, so he can't really help you there. I think they're banking on Avonte Maddox returning. That helps put Josiah Scott back on special teams. Maybe he'll help that unit there. But I would like to see it more than one game, like you guys. Got to be from Missouri here and show me that you're really, really different.
All right, you need to show us the way to an Eagle victory on Sunday. I'm assuming you're going to pick them to beat the Giants. Reading between the lines, last 25 minutes you spent with us. Sounds like that's the way you're leaning. How easy, how difficult are Eagle fans going to be able to leave with 5 minutes to go to beat the New Jersey Turnpike traffic? How do you see this game playing out on Sunday?
Well, there is one factor that might threaten what I think about this game, and that's because, there's three things in life that are guaranteed: death, taxes, and rain when the Eagles play at MetLife Stadium. Happens every single year. It's amazing, no matter what time of the year. So if it rains heavily, that could muck it up a little bit, right? But I just don't – this is not a good matchup for the Giants because of philosophies. What the Giants do is blitz, and they play a ton of man coverage. What the Eagles do is block up blitzes, and Jalen Hurts picks apart man coverage. And teams like we talked about with the identity, it's not like Wink Martindale is going to wake up Sunday morning and be like, you know what? I feel like playing a lot of zone today. So you just do what you do. So I don't see how the Giants will be able to score a whole lot of points, but I see a pathway for the Eagles being able to score a lot of points. So I believe I picked 27-13 in the podcast that dropped today. Eagles 27, Giants 13.
By 2 touchdowns. If I set the over-under at Jalen Hurts' rushing yards, because that's where I think the Giants are going to pay the price. They're going to blitz. Hurts is going to avoid the one guy who can make a play, and he's going to take off and grab 15, 18, 20 yards. Over-under rushing yards for Jalen Hurts, 89.5. You going under or over?
I'm going to take the under because the Giants secondary is so beat. I mean, they have 4 starters out. Xavier McKinney's out. Aaron Robinson's not definitely out, but he may not play. Adoree Jackson, I think, is suffering from a neck injury, and then Darnay Holmes also. So when the Eagles smell blood like that, they tend to throw the ball around pretty well. And then, I think Miles Sanders will be able to run himself pretty good. So I think Jalen will run like maybe 5 or 6 times and maybe in that 35, 45 yard range, but I don't see him needing to be that rush offense the way he was for a little bit when they lost Dallas Goedert.
All right, I'm going to take the over. I think he's going to be a key element, him with his legs. This will be a remake of the Packer game from just 2 weeks ago. But we shall see. We all got the Eagles winning. Geoff Mosher, thanks for adding your insight to us, to our show today. Enjoy the game on Sunday. Thanks, bud.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good one.
Our buddy from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. That would be Geoff Mosher here with us on Birds 365. All right, coming back, Tone and I need to put a bow on the show.